May I now call upon the clerk of this court to read out the charges in the third part of the charges in your handout. This is charge 3 that we will be reading now. Thank you.
This is indeed the third charge in your accusation and your fact sheet. That reads as follows. The state of the Netherlands is charged with committing crimes under Section 3 of the Intergenerational Climate Crimes Act on the basis of 3 complaints filed before this court. The complainants, comrades past, present and future in Mongolia, that is the third claim, have made the following allegations against the state of the Netherlands. First, that the state of the Netherlands signed a bilateral investment treaty agreement with the state of Mongolia, fraudulently representing to the state of Mongolia that the treaty would bring benefits to the human and non-human residents of the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. Second, that the state of the Netherlands allowed Rio Tinto and Turquoise Hill Resources to use the bilateral trade agreement with Mongolia as legal cover to carry out mining activities that have disemboweled the earth-depleted water sources and made the Gobi Desert uninhabitable for its human and non-human residents. Third, that the state of the Netherlands colluded with the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and engaged in lending practices that have left the state of Mongolia with a large national debt. 4, that by allowing legal persons to operate under the cover of the bilateral investment treaty, the state of the Netherlands allows legal persons to avoid paying taxes and benefits from the circulation of money within the Netherlands. And 5, that the state of the Netherlands permits legal persons to sue Bolivia, Peru, and Mongolia for failing to comply with the provisions of the bilateral investment treaty, and at the same time denies Bolivia, Peru, and Mongolia the authority to sue the legal persons or the state of the Netherlands for wrongdoings.
I now call upon the witness Sukhgerel Dugersuren of the organization of Oyu Tolgoi Watch or OT Watch in Mongolia to present their evidence on behalf of comrades past, present, and future in Mongolia. Thank you.
The Gobi Desert in the Gobi province of Mongolia houses mega-sized coal, copper, and other mineral extraction operations driven by foreign investors, including the Dutch government and its development bank, FMO. The Dutch government is involved in mining here through many channels. As a shareholder of the World Bank Group and representing Mongolia on its board, the European banks EBRD, EIB. All of these together have made possible the largest public finance deal in the history of mining and metals industry for the Oyu Tolgoi project. This huge investment in mining operations, directly and indirectly, have been pushing Mongolia to create investor-friendly policy framework and commit to investment protection via bilateral treaties. The Dutch government enables mining companies such as Rio Tinto to avoid paying Mongolian tax. The Netherlands, as a tax haven, allowed the creation of the Oyu Tolgoi Netherlands BV, a mailbox company used to avoid taxes on income earned in Mongolia. The creation of investor-friendly policy frameworks started way back in 1995 with amendments to mining and foreign investment legislation. These historical landside images of Oyu Tolgoi, the investor-friendly policies, and the investment agreement developed by the World Bank-led foreign investors all looked benign in the beginning, with no hint of this project and mining sprawl turning into a mega ecocide and major political destabilizer in the country. With the international pressure, an investment agreement was developed for Oyu Tolgoi that required the amendment of the law on water to facilitate miners' exclusive access and use rights over self-discovered water resources, as stipulated in the Articles 6.13 and 6.14 of the investment agreement, essentially privatizing water resources and dispossessing the Mongolian people and robbing its ecosystem. Water is the scarcest life-sustaining resource in the desert, yet it is mined by Rio Tinto at 870 liters per second rate at no cost. The cost of water paid by Rio Tinto is tax-deductible. In addition to tax disputes, there is also dispute over water usage reporting and disclosure of full technical information. Extraction of free water in uncontrolled amounts in a desert ecology for the sake of mining and processing metals, especially washing coal, is ecocide and a criminal act against humanity. Financing coal mines, even indirectly, in this region should be treated as an aggravating circumstance in considering the punishment for such crimes. The construction of Gunihole underground pipeline with 28 pump stations that provide the so-called brackish water for Oyu Tolgoi cost the local nomads loss of a saxaul forest, loss of shallow water aquifers and pastures, all resulting in loss of livelihood, the right to traditional nomadic lifestyle, pastoralist identity and culture for current herders and their future generations.
Оюу толгой төстэй юунуудаар 28 худаг гарсан энэ хоёр цооног гүний. Тэгээ тэр гүний цооног худаг 28 худаг гарснаас болж одоо энэ ус маш их татварсан. Одоо манай энэ уудаг ус шавг гэдэг газар элбэг устай байсан. Одоо ер нь 50 тэмээ ханахгүй боллоо. Тэгээд үр хүүхдээнд одоо ер нь яаж амьдэрдэм болдоо л гэж бодох юм даа өшөөгөрч одоо мэти юм бол яах вэ? Тэгдэг юм одоо хэдих юм яах.
Undai River, a vital ephemeral river, was diverted from flowing into the OT open pit, and its Borovo spring, which did not freeze in winter, was destroyed despite pastoralists' protests and complaints filed with the IFC's ombudsman in 2013. Gobi is rich with rare and endangered wildlife, historical and archaeological sites, but Rio Tinto claims that there was no baseline data available at the time they did the environmental and social impact assessment in 2012, 10 years after impacts from its operations were already seen. A painting depicting the destroyed Undai River was tracked down in the local museum.
Хуашаад орж исэн. Хойно хүнийх нь 94 оны зураг ийм зургийг таадах юм бол.
Тий, одоо энэ дундангийн ууллаа л та. Өшөө юм сох юм хар бол байхгүй. Тэгэхээр дундангийн уул тэгээд одоо яг энэ Ундаан уулын одоо жишээлбэл оюутлогоо яг өмнөх хэсгээс авсан харуулсан зураг байхгүй.
Одоо энэ оюутлогоо тэр харагдаж байна баримтаа. Тэгээ оюутлогоос баруун урд талд нь орны баруун урд талд байж байгаа. Дөрвөн үйлрлийн туршид ингээд огт ширгэхгүй, хөлдөхгүй, өвөлжөнгөн ан амтэн, араатан жигүүртэн бүхэл таван хушуумал нь уудаг, зунжин намаржангаан отрын бүс нутаг хавар хамгийн эрт ногоо иддэг, хамгийн эрт одоо төл малаан гаргаж боожулдаг тийм л газар байсан юм л да. Тэгээ та нарт одоо энээс нь илүү гоё, энээс илүү сайхан үйлчлэлтэй ийм сайхан одоо булгийг бий болгож өгнө. Гэт ингээд биднийг одоо хуураад дарга даамлыг хуураад малчид ард иргэдийг хуураад ингэж худлаа ярьсаар байгаад одоо тэр өөрчилсөн байгаа нь одоо нэг төрбаагаар гарч байгаа нэг ердөө нэг жоохон тийм ус. Тэгээд одоо ингээд 2021 он болцоод байдаг. Гэтэл нөгөө сайхан зураг, сайхан видео бичлэг одоо огт байхгүй. Энэ зүгээр ердөө нэг карантаар гарч байгаа ус энийг бол бид нар хүлээн зөвшөөрөхгүй. Хэзээч Боровогийн булаг гэж ийм юм байдаггүй, ийм юм байгаагүй. Хуучин байсан тэр л булгаан бид нар нэхнэ. Энэ хашааныхаа дөрвөн талд одоо тэр хуучин Боровогийн булаг тэр үзүүлж байсан зураг видео бичлэгэнтэй яг таарсан тийм одоо дөрвөн булаг бий болгож өгөхийг л нэхэж байгаа юм.
Оюутлогч энэ сөрөг нөлөөллөөр усгүй, бэлчээргүй бол уламжлалт нүүдэлчин ахуй соёлын алдах аюул нөлөөлөхөд 2012-13 онуудад олон улсын санхүүгийн корпорацийн эрх зүйн хяналт нийслэл зөвлөгөө омбудсманы газар онцлог гаргасан. Бүтэн 5 жил хэлцэл хийсний үр дүнд гидрологийн судалгаанд үндэслэн баталгаатай усны их үүсвэр гаргаж өгч бэлчээрийг баталгаажуулах болон бусад асуудлуудыг барагдуулах давхарцсан тоогоор дөрвөн бүлэг 210 зүйл заалт бүхий гэрээг 2017 онд байгуулсан. Гэтэл даалгаврын бүтээн байгуулалтанд шаардлагатай гэх 6 тэрбум доллар Нидерланд улсад бүртгэлтэй оюутлогын Нидерланд компаниар дамжуулан авчихсан учраас өнөө хүртэл энэхүү малчтын гомдол бардуулах гэрээний зүйл заалтууд хэрэгжүүлээгүй байна. Ингэхдээ хамбууд сумын малчтын гомдол барагдаагүй байгаад үүгээр нотолж байгаамаа.
In addition to destructive diversion of Ondai River, failure to replace the ecological services of the Borovo Spring, and the depletion of shallow aquifers in Guniholai region, OTLSE is said to have distributed leaflets describing benefits of the Orkhon-Gobi project that will transfer Orkhon waters to OT, TT, and other users in the south.
Rio Tinto documents state that from 2017 onwards, Oyu Tolgoi will face water shortages, but the transfer of water from the Orkhon River through the Orkhon-Gobi project is out of the question due to its impact as well as its cost. What is your plan B for the water for the mine? Is it in fact the Orkhon-Gobi project?
Thanks very much for that question. And the short answer is no. I mean, Oyu Tolgoi actually uses water which is from a large, deep, brackish aquifer which was discovered by our geologists as part of the project. It doesn't use surface water for its operations, and this brackish aquifer is not potable, but it is appropriate. We can use it within our processes, but we certainly have no need of that water because we have adequate licensed supply from our own aquifer.
While Rio Tinto claims to have enough of their own self-discovered water, the Orkhon-Gobi water transfer project is still on the agenda of financiers of infrastructure to support more mining in the Gobi. A bird's view filming shows the magnitude of mining impact on the landscape, the destruction of pastures caused by mining infrastructure. This is nowhere close to the pasture degradation by livestock that is claimed to be the factor of causing climate change in Mongolia, a statement always found in the reports of development donors and multilateral banks, which at the same time avoid mentioning impact of mining, especially mega mines, on climate change. This long line of 100-tonnage trucks on the coal road is a normal condition for coal truckers who for many days and sometimes months live in their truck waiting for China to let them in. Most coal roads are not paved, adding to soil destruction and thus to desertification and climate change in this arid climate. Downplaying mining impact on climate change and seeking to confine pastoralists by changing nomadic land use practices is yet another crime against climate. Mongolia's climate and desertification statistics are staggering. Desert moves up northward at a speed of 5 kilometers per year, resulting in 76% of total land affected by desertification. Temperature warming has already reached 2.2 Celsius, and there is no longer a year without droughts in mining-affected regions. Foreign investment-driven destruction of pasture and water resources by extraction, processing, and transport of minerals will increase with the new post-COVID economic recovery law, which will restore voided mining licenses and double the licenses for high-end hunting of rare species of wildlife. Once a sea bottom, the Hermitsov Canyon is a tourist attraction of uninhabitable today, but may become a landscape of ordinary in this region soon.
Тэгээ ер нь бол хэд олон уул уурхай болсноос нөлөөлдөг юм уу? Бороо бол энэ эрс багтаж байна. Тэгээд одоо бороо орох төр үйл буудаж байна. Тэгээ бороо орохоо байчж байна. Энэ одоо ямар учрээд үг нь зарим газар бол үйл буудаа бороо орж байна л гэдэг гурван тустал ордог юм. 10 хэдэн жил бол 10 гаруй жил бол ус ер нь эрс ховордож байгаа. Уулах шамд ширгхэн ширгэж байна. Удгийн ус ховордож байна. Тэгээ ер нь амтны тоо толгой цөөрч байна. Одоо уснасаа болж гэнэ үү, ганц уднаасаа болж гэнэ үү гэх юм. Аль алинаас нь болдог баг.
When well fed and hydrated, a camel can go without water or food, sometimes for weeks. The humps on a camel's back are fatty deposits that act as a source of nutrition and should be fully upright in September. These camels, unfortunately, have not had enough food and water.
Ер нь харамсаж байгаа юм одоо үгээр хэлэх харахгүй харамсдаг юм да. Азад дэлхийд хавардаж байгаа 2 хүүхэд тэмээний одоо гол нутаг. Тэр нутаг маань одоо ер нь тэр авийг л ухацх юм бол одоо тэгэл тэмээ гэлчих нутаггүй боллоо. 5 дугаар багийн хувьд бол одоо бүр ерөөсөө тэмээ явах ямар ч өөр газар байхгүй. Ганц одоо тэмээний гэлчээр байгаа л тэр. Бүхэл бүтэн нэг баригад юм бол багтаад байдаг тийм өргөн том гол байсан шүү дээ. Тэгэл одоо ингээд ийм л царайтай газар нутаг болсон байна да. Тэгээ одоо ийм газаргүй болж хаад одоо энэ гол тараас гээд бас нэг уурхай нэмэгдэж байна. Дээр нь одоо энэ Евраад гээд бас уурхай ирээд одоо ийм уурхайнууд нэмж явах гэж байгаа одоо малцад бид нар бол одоо энэ сум орон нутаг тэр зэгээр одоо маш их эсэргүүцэж байгаа, дургуутж байгаа.
За 2001 оноос эхлээд манай энд бол маш олон уул уурхайн компани бий болсон 2001 оноос. Тэгээ уул уурхайн олон компани бий болсны улмаас одоо бидний ажил амьдрал эрүүл аюулгүй орчинд амьдрах орчин нөхцөл одоо хуучнаас дордож одоо уламжилт нүүдлийн мал аж ахуй хавчигдж байгаа учраас энэ төлөө явахар болсон. 2017 онд бол те бидний үйл ажиллагааг одоо иргэд бидний юу яагаад гол транс гэдэг энэ юу нүүрсний уурхай бол манайд одоо ямар ч зөвшөөрөл наривчлсан үнэлгээгээр орж ирсэн. Тэгээ бид нар энийг бол одоо 2010 оноос явсаар байгаад одоо 2019 онд бол улсын цэцэг хамгаалтанд авч тэр гол транс гэдэг байгууллагын үйл ажиллагааг төр зогсоосон. Нутгийн иргэдийн саналаар удаа би өмгөөлөгч авч юу шүүх хуралд явсан. За тэр шүүх хуралд бол өмгөөлөгчгүйгээр бид нар нутгийн иргэд бид нар бол ямар ч үндэслэл байгаагүй. За өмгөөлөгч авсан чи 20 сая төгрөг гэсэн. Тэгээ нутгийн иргэд дэмжиж маш их ханд өгсөлтөө гэвч тэр нь хөрөлцөхгүй байсан учраас одоо би өөрийнхөө тэтгүрийг зээж аваад ингээд юунд шүүх хуралд явсан. Тэгээ Улаанбаатар хотод шүүх хуралд би нийтдээ 38 удаа явсан байдیں۔ Одоо тэр гол трансын шүүх хуралд. Бас нутгийн иргэд бид нар 5 удаа хөвлийн баг хурал хийсэн байдیں Улаанбаатар хотод. Тэгээд сүүлдээ шүүх бол ер нь шатны байгууллагууд бол тийм ээ дандаа хуурамч үнэлгээгээр нутгийн иргэд биднэрийг хуурч юу яадаг. Шүүгч гэсэн дандаа тэр мөнгөтэй одоо тэр уул уурхайн компанид ажилладаг нь бол би энэ олон шатны байгууллагаар явж одоо мэдэрсэн юм байна. Тэгээ эцэст нь бол тий олон нийтийн хөдөлгөөн одоо юугаар л юу яасан бид нар одоо эрүүл хамгаалах сан төрийн бас байгууллага, оюутлагын хяналт төрийн бас байгууллага, одоо иргэний нийгмийн байгууллагууд болон иргэд хамтарч энэ үйл ажиллагааг одоо зогсоогоод байгаа.
Тэгээ нэмжил одоо битгөө уурхай гаргасаа нутаг ус маань байхгүй болох нь одоо тэгээд байхгүй болох хайж байгаараа чинь хүний эрх гэдэг юм дэндүү их зөрчигдөөд төр төсн нутгаа хүртэл одоо хамгаалах эрхгүй болж байна. Энэ маш их харамсалтай байна. Тэгэхээр нэмжил уурхай битгээ гараасаа л гэж их хүсэх байна да.
Do you hear me now? Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to present on behalf of affected communities from the Gobi region. I would just like to add a few details on Mongolia. Mongolia is a huge land at 3 times of France with small 3 million population. 2/3 of its land is desert, semi-desert, with huge spaces of uninhabitable space. It's 6 months cold. It's very arid, sensitive ecology, and therefore nomadism is a necessity. It's not a habit. And we have been brought up to protect the land, to not disturb a stone from its place, because every stone has a role in protecting the soil from erosion. And in this land, we have the Oyu Tolgoi. Unfortunately, it's mineral-rich place. Oyu Tolgoi is Mongolia's flagship gold, copper, and silver mine. It is ultimately owned by Rio Tinto through an ownership structure consisting of multiple subsidiaries registered in tax havens. The Netherlands is the largest FDI source listed on Mongol Bank, on central bank's books. The $6 billion investment was created to use a tax havens to avoid taxes to pay taxes in Mongolia. I apologize. I sent my PowerPoint presentation too late, and therefore it's difficult for you to understand what I'm saying without seeing the schemes. Netherlands is involved in mining in the Gobi Desert through many channels. As a founding and contributing member of EBRD, EIB, and IBRD, an active member in the governing bodies, the Netherlands sets the development policies for recipient countries. Mongolia, ED in the World Bank, a banking sector lending through FMO, ING. Through the EBRD lending, Netherlands is also investor in the MIC MAC copper gold project and Altay Hudur. All of these are located in the Gobi Desert. For Global North, the World Bank Group is the policy setter in developing countries. Mongolia EDs in the World Bank are usually from countries set with interest in Mongolia, such as Australia, New Zealand, Netherlands, always a Western or from a northern country. A Global North also dictates the trajectory of development in Mongolia, and it has been doing this since 1991. More detail can be found in our joint report, SOMO, Mining Taxes and Undermining Mongolia. One quote by Mr. Wilcock, World Bank Executive Director for Mongolia, who, when the testimony of Oyu Tolgoi impacts on nomadic herders, he said, "One cannot have an omelet without breaking some eggs." So local communities are just some eggs in the omelet that the North is making. COVID is adding to the impacts. Mongolia is discussing a new law on post-COVID economic recovery. And this law has a clause that derogates Mongolia's responsibility and commitments under all UN conventions, including on climate, biodiversity, and human rights. And the law has very clear World Bank language. The only two laws that Mongolia does not derogate from is the law on budget stability and the law on combating terrorist financing and anti-money laundering. Those are the two laws, the World Bank laws, IMF laws, that Mongolia is not derogating from under this. And I'd like to end with one comment or one witness statement that the 75-kilometer Guni-Holley road and high voltage power line water infrastructure, copper concentrate road and supply roads, a land from the underground mine size of almost a Manhattan Island size land will create subside and will become uninhabitable. And the herder said that the Netherlands should commit to receive migrants from Mongolia. Thank you for your attention. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Judges Sharon Wen, Rasigan Maharaj, Nicholas Hildyard, do you have any questions or clarifications that you need from the witness now?
I don't know where, which way where do I look? Just talk? Okay. In my language, I'm just going to say, hi, speaks ASCII. It's very hard to hear what is happening to your land, but more importantly, what's happening to all the things that live on that land, including the rocks that you're referring to at the beginning of this presentation, that I think people don't understand when you come from a traditional territory and you live with the land, and when the land is being destroyed like that, how hard it is for everything, including all the living species, and seeing those pictures of the camels and other animals trying to get access to water. And that guy from Rio Tinto saying that they were, quote unquote, having water from their aquifer, which was really, I think, kind of a disgusting thing to say. But you talk about immigrating, but what happens to all of the other creation that's there? They'll die if you leave them. The animals, the sheep, the camels, all that stuff will disappear also. The land will be, everything will be denuded if that's what happens. Is that the concern that your people? We're talking about
Yes, of course.
intergenerational climate crimes, because once the intergenerations are gone, there is nothing there.
Yes. In fact, the young herders are very worried about the future because with no water in the pastures, they are not able to start herding. And education that is provided to them and skills and jobs that the mining companies provide is not what they want. But they have to take those jobs in order to survive. But eventually, many young people are leaving herding, leaving the area because they don't see future in that land.
Yes, because they're breaking the connection with the past and leaving no future. So this is what's been forced on them. I understand that. But I think that people who don't live on the land like you do or I do don't see that connection, and they think that if they have a Western kind of job, what I call Western kind of job, that it's okay, that it covers off all the things that they're doing to the creation. But that doesn't answer the responsibility that you have to that area. And that's what I think I heard in the video of the people talking, was that the pain of that loss is so great. And what's happening, they're not listening to them, but they're trying to tell them they're not listening to them. And people are not hearing what they're saying. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I heard when I listened to you talking. So thank you very much.
Yes, I might just add that the Western civilization rules are being brought into a nomadic setting whereby they are land titling. Nomads live in 2-3 families living together, working together, but land title is given to only one family. And the rest, when mining comes in and then there is resettlement and compensation, then only the one land title holder gets the compensation and resettlement support. So bringing in with rules and laws from settled civilization into a nomadic setting is another crime.
Is there any other question? Yes?
Also, thank you very much for the presentations. I was struck particularly by a statement made earlier where mention was made of an animation, some type of simulation of what benefits would flow from what you're calling as a development. And mention was also made of impact assessments that were done. So a question for me is about the quality of this knowledge that's being used. If it's a simulation, on what basis, what is the history that allows you to say this future is going to be possible? Is there a local knowledge base that informs these assessments? Or is it all coming from the global north in these projections itself? I hope I've been clear in the question. It's about the knowledge systems itself.
I think, not sure I understand the question, but I will start with, this is a continuation of my statement before that rules and legislation and policies from a civilized, settled civilization from the north are not applicable in the nomadic setting where the climate, where the desert and semi-desert conditions dictate the use of land and its resources, the most sustainable use of land and its resources. And the impact assessments are carried out by Western standards or procedures, and they do not read or incorporate the customary traditions, and customary laws are not recognized by the set of new laws that Mongolia has that have been put in place by settled civilization impact or impact this.
Thank you very much for that clarity.
Are there any questions from the judges? You're all right? Okay. Please do, yeah.
Do you think it would be useful to have a recommendation that any quote unquote Western company coming into your territory has to use your environmental standards, the herders, the people that use the land, as part of that evaluation, that it be written into the contract?
It would be useful to have a recommendation like that. It will be useful to have a recommendation for Western companies to recognize that nomadic herders in Mongolia are indigenous peoples and should be protected under the Indigenous Peoples Declaration, and the free, prior, informed consent should be used when negotiating any activity on their land.
If I may put a question to you, and I want to thank you for your evidence and for the work that you have put into this hearing. You mentioned in the end that there are a lot of young people who now are either forced to or want to move out of traditional occupations and come to urban areas or migrate to countries like the Netherlands and so on. And what do you think should be done or ought to be done to stop that process and to make sure that young people continue to protect the land and protect the people and the ecosystems there and the non-human life forms that exist there? If we are to protect that, what do we do with the young people who don't see any other hope for them in Mongolia itself?
It's most likely people would recommend to create jobs, develop other sectors that are job intensive rather than mining. But unfortunately, today, the West and the World Bank and its development institutions are continuing the old development model. They are not giving up on neoliberal capitalism. They want to get the Mongolia state out of the economy, especially from the extractive sector. They're moving very speedily into extracting other natural resources, including biodiversity. And without reducing consumption globally, without changing the global markets model, we won't be able to save the young generation's jobs and what they want to do and the lifestyles they want to have. It is very unsustainable for me in Mongolia, in the coldest of countries, to have a fresh banana every day. How much does that cost to local communities that lose land? How much does it cost to transport it to me? How much people are losing in terms of roads or greenhouse gases? So in order for us to talk about saving local communities from impact from such mega mines or any mega development projects, we need to talk about consumption, our own consumption, for future generations.
Thank you. I will now open up questions for the members of the public jury here, sitting here. But I am informed that Rodanta Alhers wants to make a contribution. Rodanta, are you here?
Yeah, I just, as a witness and having worked with Sukhgerel, the contribution I'd like to make is that this is possible because countries like the Netherlands facilitate this. They facilitate tax avoidance, they facilitate the creation of companies where companies like Rio Tinto that are destroying a landscape and communities can conduit their money through and make profits that are not going back to these communities. So these communities are not only losing their resources, they're also being looted of their future. And I think we cannot see this as just a Mongolian issue or a Dutch issue, but as a global system that enables and promotes this, and that should be stopped. That's all.
Is there anyone else from the public jury present here that has a question or needs a clarification or would like to ask the witness something? Anyone? Okay, shall we just take that? You have to, in the end, assess the evidence and come to a conclusion. So if you do have questions or if you're not very clear about something, now will be the time to ask them. Yes?
Thank you. You mentioned you had a quote about the eggs and the omelette, and that was a local governor, right?
The person who said that in order to have an omelette you have to break some eggs is the World Bank executive director representing Mongolia.
Then my question would
an Australian. Yes.
Then my question would be what the local governance or like the people who are actually representing the native population think about this, or how they are represented in these like treaties or making of the treaties.
No, people are not asked about their opinion when bilateral treaties are made.
Okay. So there's no like governmental official representation of like this region.
In the case of Oyu Tolgoi, the investment agreement was negotiated. It took 6 years. Force approved it. The agreement was approved when there were 9 people on hunger strike protesting against it. Those people were put in hospital for forced care, and the agreement was signed. Civil society fought against it for 6 years. Local community members were only promised paradise.
Thank you for your presentation. In the video, we see one activist who explains that after 9 years of proceedings, they managed to stop the project temporarily, at least. I would like to know, what is your assessment of the possibility of using legal means available in Mongolia to civil society groups like you to stop the mining activities?
As mentioned clearly by the activists, that it took 9 years to temporarily halt the license, and that the judiciary is not fair and corrupt. And it's very difficult for us to use the local national judicial system to stop mining, to stop unfair practices.
And what
We
about
use both.
political? Sorry? Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. The government is pro-mining.
So that was my follow-up question.
68% of parliament members have mining companies or have an interest in mining operations.
And then what about the possibility
And we
for
have
political
World
change?
Bank. Every time Mongolian government started negotiations to change the Oyu-Tolgoi investment agreement or improve the minerals law, foreign investment law, the government falls. The current government is the only government that has completed its 4 years of term. All other governments fell before 2 years. And the government listens to the World Bank, development banks, IMF, American Chamber of Commerce, Euro Chamber of Commerce, and Mongolian Business Council is led by the current Oyu-Tolgoi CEO. So you can imagine the situation of the politics and the will or lack of will to be responsible.
Thank you so much. I was hoping you could tell us a bit more about the painting that we see in the video. This is under subtitles Testimony Number 2, and it's the painting that was dated to 1994. I take it that the painting is meant to establish the existence of a mountain that has been mined. And I'm interested in how that painting and other forms of artistic representation serve as evidence of a cultural memory that's otherwise hard to establish. Can you speak a little bit more to how forms of representation are used to remember a landscape? I'll leave it there.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, that is the Ondai River Valley, which had a Borovo spring, a very important ecological service that didn't freeze in the winter and was there to support all living in the area. That was the place where nomadic livestock herders and wildlife respected each other's right to water. And that whole area was destroyed. And the painting is the only memory that tells us about what it looked like before it was mined. Right after that section, you should have seen the mined area, Oyu Tolgoi. Oyu Tolgoi sits right on that reserve land, the best pasture with 12 months water available is the best place, pasture that people and wildlife depended on. And that's been mined. And the only thing that we found was that painting. Unfortunately, now local people realize, and thanks to phones with photo cameras, that they are taking pictures to make sure that, they have a memory of something that will be lost soon.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to say something? Yeah.
I have a further question. 68% of the government in Mongolia has some kind of shares with some mining companies or attachments to mining companies. Is that the number you said, 68? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So what is their 50-year projection when there's no more water in Mongolia? What are they going to drink? Have they thought about that, or are they just thinking about their mining stocks? Just a question.
Sounds like they're thinking about making money today rather than worrying about times where then they will not exist. There are many reports also commissioned by the World Bank, which tell us that in Ulaanbaatar, in the capital city, and in the Gobi, we will soon be running out of water. And the United States Millennium Challenge account is providing some assistance in water recycling, water processing, grey water infrastructure. But that's not going to be available down in the Gobi. Rio Tinto claims that using new drier tailings technologies is just too expensive.
So they don't really have any constructive plans. When the water is gone, it's gone.
In terms of Rio Tinto and its financiers, they don't care. EBRD once made a statement saying that they'll be out of Oyu Tolgoi a year before their involvement in the water damages can be traced or they can be held accountable.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your very moving evidence. I just got two very quick questions of clarification, actually. One is the World Bank representative from Mongolia who talked about omelets and eggs. Was he actually Mongolian, or is Mongolia represented through another country at the World Bank?
Mongolia is always represented by a Western country, and in most cases represented by countries that have interest mining interests in Mongolia. Repeatedly, a executive director representing Mongolia was from Australia. I think once from Netherlands in recent years. I'm talking about more recent years, and from Netherlands and from New Zealand.
Thank you very much. Please.
Alternate directors, maybe from other countries, alternate directors. Current alternate director is a South Korean.
And just another quick clarification. You gave a lot of evidence about the theft of water, the expropriation of water. What happens to the water once it's been used in the mining process? Where does it go? How toxic is it?
Mining water goes into the tailings storage facility, and in the landside part of the film video, the big square blue things, that's the where the water that is used goes. Rio Tinto claims that it recovers 85% of water that's been used in processing, but there is no proof, there is no scientific evidence. The evidence that we see on the ground speaks of contrary. They had requested additional land to build storage facilities. 50% more than they had planned earlier, which means that they're not recovering even the 64% that they promised in the early stages in the feasibilities.
Do they use cyanide in the process of getting out the gold? I mean, is the water contaminated?
They don't use cyanide, but they use what is called reagent, a chemical solution. What is in the reagent is not publicly disclosed, but the water is contaminated with different chemicals.
Any questions for the anyone? Oh yeah, okay.
So wait for her to come back. Hi. I was wondering if you have any accounts of water protectors, environmental defenders, or justice organizers like yourself who are being threatened, persecuted, repressed, or exiled because of the actions of Rio Tinto or its local associates or the Mongolian state, that you would like to share as to this court, and whether we could hold the Dutch state responsible for these actions and their consequences. Thank you.
Retaliation, various forms of retaliation for criticizing were used and are used by the company. They are used less obviously in the case of activists such as myself, who are recognized and more public, more visible. But those at the local communities, very, very difficult to track, very difficult to have full information about what is happening and the forms of harassment and retaliation that the company uses. But definitely, when you complain about something, you are the last to receive compensation or smallest compensation. There are physical attacks in recent times have not been registered. But legal actions against whistleblowers and employees in the company are used.
Okay, thank you very much for your contributions today and for the testimony that you have provided us. And I'm sure the judges and the jury here have learned a lot about your country.